I just saw the Warcraft movie, and it's not that bad. It's also not that great. It's not the worst movie I've seen in 2016 by any means. Have we already forgotten Zack Snyder's horrible mess? And I don't think the overall general sentiment is deserved, but I can understand it. This is a film for fans of the series, of the franchise. It's for people who've played World of Warcraft or grew up playing Warcraft 1, 2, 3. Which is likely why when I saw it there were only about 24 other people in the theater at the largest AMC in my area on opening night. Albeit it wasn't in IMAX or 3D, but it was still a pretty disappointing turnout. So, Gumble Roger Ebert here, and I'm going to talk Warcraft. For the first few minutes, I will not reveal any spoilers, and I'll make sure I let you know when I'm about to divulge some specifics I found impressive and annoying. So, here we go. The first 30 minutes of Warcraft are insanely fast-paced. The movie bounces from one shot to the next with almost no transition. It seems like the camera could not stay on one scene for more than about 30 seconds. But when you cram a whole bunch of spring-loaded plot pieces into a box, it eventually explodes. So the story ends up being extremely difficult to follow. I was only able to keep up because I have some familiarity with the Warcraft lore. So I can see why someone who doesn't know anything about it would be completely lost by this convoluted plot in even just the first 5 minutes. And pacing is the film's largest issue. The pacing is so odd. It cannot keep it, there's nothing consistent about it. It's just trying to convey too much information in one film. It's like taking an entire season of Game of Thrones and putting it into one 2-hour episode. It just doesn't work. Should be clear though, even though the plot is a bit sporadic, you don't need to have played Warcraft 1 to understand what's happening. The movie goes out of its way to showcase familiar places from World of Warcraft, and it's a really nice nod, especially as someone who played WoW in vanilla. There are a few fan service moments that even got a chuckle out of me. But I should be clear, if you're a diehard fan, if you read WoW Wiki, like it's the King James Bible during the Inquisition, you might be a bit annoyed. Certain aspects of the narrative were changed, not enough that it affects the general story and changes the history of Warcraft completely, but enough that it is its own vision, which I think is perfectly fine as a on-paper story. In terms of how it was actually done and enacted in the film, well, it's a bit different. So if you've seen the trailers, which I'm sure you have, you know, it's obvious Warcraft is a movie brimming with CGI, special effects. Some of it's fantastic, some of it is completely uninspiring. Close-ups of the orcs were typically awesome to see. It's far better than Avatar, which I never really understood the appeal of. Anyone who worked on the effects of this movie deserves, you know, a big, tiny hand round of applause, especially Duratan's facial expressions. They conveyed emotion better than most of the actors in the film. Some of the wide shots of the environments were neat. Stormwind and Deadwing Pass in particular looked really cool. Really neat to see Deadwing Pass before it turned into a alleyway for China farmers to farm those birds if you played vanilla. But there were numerous scenes that just fell flat. It was obviously a green screen and the background felt disconnected from what was going on. Other effects that were used were just unnecessarily campy. One in particular caused me to cringe physically. I made a small sound. I imagine some stuff was thrown in there just to make China buy movie tickets to see the light show. It was, you know, it's hit or miss. Some scenes are great, some trip and fall right on their face. My biggest issue with the Warcraft film, and I think one of the main reasons people are not happy, is that many of the actors phoned in their performance, as if nobody cared because this was a video game adaptation and they just wanted to say their lines before going back to their trailer. They did not inspire believable characters, especially Lothar. There were a few scenes that demanded a strong reaction and all you get is a blank stare. It's funny, you can tell when nobody gives a fuck because there's a few dialogue scenes where you've got two characters talking and the camera focuses on the listener rather than the speaker. What, you couldn't show their facial expressions? Were they that bad? I do have to give another little, we're going to give a lot of tiny rounds of applause here to Ben Schnetzer as Khadgar, and like I said before, the CGI Durotan. They are easily the best performances in the film, and by the end of the movie, they were the only characters I cared about, the only believable characters on screen. I would have preferred if they were the only two characters in the film. That would have been a much better movie, instead of, you know, all these other guys who just, they really just didn't care. I was really disappointed in their performances. And then narrative. The story isn't a mess if you stand back far enough, but because this is a movie that tries to tell its plot through the characters, it falls flat. There's too much going on to forge meaningful relationships and character arcs. There were a few plot points that I felt were just thrown in to juxtapose characters, and they felt entirely unnecessary. The evolving narrative and the dynamic between characters just falls flat because you're just not given enough substance to care. When people weren't talking and it was environment scenes or action, it was great. Whenever they tried to progress the plot through their characters, again, unless it was Durotan or Khadgar, it didn't matter. I was bored, honestly. So again, you know, Warcraft isn't bad. This is the spoiler mark. So this is my little conclusion here before we go to the spoilers. It's not a bad movie. It's not exactly a good movie. It's kind of in between. It straddles that line. I guess, to be fair, it's like a 5 or a 6. Probably a 5. Just because it had so many strong elements and then had so many weak elements. I think that, I don't know, it feels like somebody came down hard on Mr. Jones here and said, oh, we need this, 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 and that. You gotta cut that. I'd love to see a director's cut of the Warcraft movie. I wonder if there's a ton of unused footage that maybe would have fleshed out the plot more and made you care about these characters. But then again, the acting was just terrible, so I don't know. Anyway, spoiler mark, here we go. Okay, I hope you left if you don't want to hear spoilers. So here's a banger that really pissed me off. Speaking of bad acting, Lothar, right? There's a scene, sees his son die in front of his eyes. A giant claw shreds his body, and then the son's body is flung at a shield of lightning in front of his face. The body smacks the wall, it falls limp on the ground. And what does Lothar do? He just stares menacingly. That took me right out of the movie. Go crazy, scream, shout, attack the lightning shield again with your sword. What the fuck, man? Your son just died and you've been building up this I'm scared of my son dying subplot, and then when he goes and dies, you just go ahead and nod? Get the fuck out of here. Come on. On a more positive note, the really awesome nods to fans of World of Warcraft that I thought were cool. You see a dwarf on a mountaintop overlooking Ironforge in the first 5 minutes of the film, and it's an almost verbatim shot from the opening cinematic of vanilla World of Warcraft. Thought that was really cool. At another point in the film, our heroes are crossing a bridge, and for a brief second you see a murloc in a river, or a little riverbed. Now murlocs are, typically cartoony and somewhat out of place in a film that's kind of striving for realism. Take that with a grain of salt. But you only see it for a half a second, you hear the gurgle. I thought that was neat, kind of funny. Murlocs used to be the funniest thing to me back in the day. The brief draining and high elf shots were also cool. I was a bit disappointed that there were no gnomes in the movie. There's a certain scene where there's a council in Stormwind between the forces of the Alliance. You see humans, elves, and dwarves, but no gnomes. I kind of wanted to see a gnome because my first character is a gnome warlock, but I mean that's not really a complaint, just an observation. Speaking of observations, I didn't understand why Lothar was in Ironforge for about 20 seconds at the beginning of the film. This comes back to the pacing issue. A lot of times you'll see a shot, it'll only last for about 20 seconds, and you just go, why was that there? Did they really need that? And I guess it's just fan service. Let's show off Ironforge. Maybe in an earlier cut of the movie, dwarves played a bigger role, even though that's not lore relevant. Because there really was no point. I get it, they had to show how the Alliance, how the humans get the boom cannons, but was it really necessary? You could have just said like a small, it was basically the same as saying, oh, the dwarves gave us some boom cannons, we can use those to fight the orcs. You really didn't need to show Lothar in Ironforge. It was cool to see, I get it, but again, there were so many little moments like that where it felt like they were just showing off a certain element of this universe for the fans, not really to drive the plot forward, or maybe just to show off the special effects cinematics, which has its positives and negatives. Going back to bad acting, I know I'm just jumping around here, but these are just notes, and I'm just reading off the notes. The relationship between Garona and Lothgar felt so forced. It was so lame. I didn't care. There was no time for these characters to grow together, to kind of come. There was no like true moment in the film where you're like, okay, now now they'll probably be in a relationship, they'll fall in love, whatever. No time to breathe, and that's again because so many elements were crammed together that you couldn't really feel. You didn't feel their characters develop, and it's also because of the terrible acting. But at one point in the film, it's all of a sudden, oh, now they're in a relationship. Well, not in a relationship, but now they're like Romeo and Juliet. They're star-crossed lovers, and they can't be together because she's an orc and he's a human. I mean, I just didn't care. There was nothing to care about. It felt very forced, very out of place, schlocky. It should have just been dropped. It needed some room, some other catalyst to let it develop. Also, Garona. Speaking of Garona, she gets accepted by the humans almost immediately. This is... The queen personally delivers a blanket to a stranger because Garona's in a cell. They've just captured her as part of a band of raiding orcs, which they barely know about. The queen, man! Garona should have taught everyone a lesson and just stabbed Lady Taria. Maybe then they'd say, oh, I guess we shouldn't have done that time. It was a weird moment. It just felt very unrealistic. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Garona's wearing a dress like she's a human, and she's walking around Stormwind and whatnot. I guess, I don't know, it felt very odd to me. I mean, I guess they just needed to drive the plot forward. Whatever. Again, to bring it back, the overall issue with Warcraft, and with a lot of these establishing adaptation movies, is that they try and cram way too much in one film. Imagine if Lord of the Rings was one film instead of 3. And actually, they did try that. There was an animated version in either the late 80s or the early 90s. And what ends up happening is that at the end of the film, a narrator just sums up the entire plot. I'm pretty sure it was almost all of Two Towers and Return of the King summed up in the last 5 minutes of the movie. I would have liked to see a film with a narrower focus. Maybe it only followed Durotan or Khadgar, again, because they're my favorites, but just one character in this universe. It doesn't even have to be related to the lore. Maybe it's something else that would help establish the Warcraft universe first before you tried to do the big epic story. I would have given people, a general audience, more time to familiarize yourself with this universe, and it would establish some characters instead of trying to be this all-encompassing blockbuster that's just banking on fanboys and overseas sales to generate revenue. But I know that will never happen because that's not what executives want. So is Warcraft as bad of a film as everyone makes it out to be? The answer is no. But that's also only because I already knew about Warcraft. I'm a fan. I've been playing Blizzard games since Earthling 2.0. If you don't know the universe, you probably won't like it. Was it worth the $20 I paid for admission? Considering they gave me the bottom of the freaking popcorn machine, so I had to shove kernels in my mouth like a buttery barbarian. Maybe not this time. It's likely to be very successful in China, so you can expect a sequel, and I wouldn't mind seeing one. I hope it's a bit more refined. Maybe they give Jones here some more breathing room, because I love Duncan Jones. He directed Moon, which is a fantastic movie. But Warcraft, if you're a fan, go see it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's a solid eggplant out of 10.